But without further ado, I am passing it over to Zoe.
Hi, afternoon, morning, everybody, and thanks to Sarah for that introduction. Really appreciate it. Fabio, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. I know that almost everyone here will have seen your extraordinary work in the New York Times over the past few days. Extraordinary work. Thank you so much for your efforts making it, telling these stories which really need to get out to the world, and for offering to share your experiences with us as a reporter and how we can report safely and ethically on this ongoing pandemic, which is affecting so many of us across the world. To start off, maybe you could just talk a little bit about the assignment that you were on, and some of the kind of key considerations that you had when you started planning for it and preparing to go on it.
Yeah, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Sarah, for the introduction, and Zoe. And first of all, I want to thank you, Frontline's freelance register, because yesterday or 2 days ago, when I called Sarah, because I would like to share my experience with colleagues, and I think it's important, people interested in covering COVID-19, she answered immediately, and she arranged the meeting in 48 hours. And so, thank you for supporting journalism and photojournalism. And yeah, let's start. So, as you said, I've been working for Times, covering the crisis in its epicenter in Bergamo. And before thinking to start working, I spent like 10 days at home, try to understand how to work in this environment and what kind of images try to show. In my experience, the images that I saw, a lot of images were about empty spaces and street picture, but nothing inside of the COVID-19 story. So this is what I try to do, to try to get into the story, to try to show how dangerous the virus is, and the faces and the names of the people more than the number. So this was my approach. To start working, I've been in contact with the Red Cross of the small village near Bergamo called Alzano Lombardo, and this where the COVID virus spread in Italy. It was the first place. So it's symbolic place too, and the situation is still horrible over there. And I got in contact with Nadia, that was the person in charge of the Red Cross, Italian Red Cross. And before going there, I had a long chat with her, trying to, first of all, to understand if it was possible to do this kind of story, and try to understand if they were agreed their opinion, and and after she was super open with me. She asked me, she was happy about the project, and we start basically working together. So what she did a letter, because in Italy, under the lockdown, everything is closed. You cannot move, and if you want to move with the car and going to Milan or that place, you need like a letter to move, letter that testify your work or your assignment. So she wrote a letter with me from the Red Cross headquarters in Alzano Lombardo, and I went there on 15, the night between 14 and 15 of this month. And I arrived there with no problem, with no checkpoint. So I was lucky. And I started working early in the morning because I was with her following with her turn. They work that depend the turn, but on the Sunday 15 morning, she was working. So we start knowing each other early in the morning, 7:30, start talking about the project and talking about again, because very important thing is try to get the confidence and the trust of the people you are working with. So be transparent and try to explain the reason why you are interested in covering this topic in this way. So she started cleaning the ambulances and waiting for the call, basically, because the Red Cross with the ambulance go to the people's house patient house that need their support or their visit. So we were waiting for calls like every day, and we start receiving calls. And yeah, it was important to think about the time that you need to put to develop a kind of story, because let's imagine that not all the calls were about suspected coronavirus patients. So this means that you lose time, going in place where it doesn't make sense to get a picture because it's out of your project, And this happened more or less every day for a week. So when I arrived in there, one of the most important things was how to protect physically myself against the infection risk, and how to protect the people around me against the infection risk too. So Nadia, already in the call, told me that working with them, she could give me the suite, the full body suite, and the glasses, the goggles, and the mask FF2 or FF3. By the way, I used another kind of mask that if you are interested, we can talk deeper about it, and the gloves. And she, before starting to the mission, she explained me how to dress and how to undress once you get out from a house of suspected patient. And this is a protocol that you have to follow, and it's something that have to become normal for you. The first time you don't know even to get out the gloves, but for getting out the gloves, there's a way to get out the gloves. So you have to get the gloves from inside, try not touching the gloves and get it out without touching the glove that can be infected. So my equipment was a full body suit, a double gloves. Now I'm going to explain why double gloves. And goggles, there are these kind of goggles. And the mask. When I was working in difficult environment, I mean, the risk of the COVID-19 is that depends on the percentage of the particles that can be in the environment, you get more risk. It's more risky. If you are in a place with the percentage of possible infection particles, the risk is lower. But when you enter in a suspected patient house with the whole body suite, the risk can be higher. So I was using another kind of mask. I can show you, this is the normal one. It's the FFP2, I mean filtering phase piece 2. 1, 2, 3 are the level of protection. The 2 and the 3 are fine to cover this issue. And yeah, but when I was working, I was using another kind of mask. That the filter is higher, is P100 against P100. Instead, the other are against N95. This is the percentage of the filter of the mask. 95 means the percentage is 95%, and 100 is 98.7% of coverage. So that one is better.
Fabio, what kind of environments how would you differentiate between the different masks? Which environment were you using one type and which one were you using the other type?
Basically, when I was walking in the street and was talking with the Red Cross in their headquarters that is sanitized every day, when I was going to the supermarket to get food, when I was wherever I was using the FFP2 or 3 mask. When I was inside the hospitals in Bergamo or other hospital, or when I was inside patients' house, I was working with other kind of mask.
Okay. And would you be able to describe for everybody who's watching the kind of protocols, say if you were using the full suit and the gloves and the mask, say the heavier duty mask, what would your protocol be for dressing and undressing?
Yeah. So the important thing, I suggest to keep a space free of infection risk. This means that my car, I tried, because after you try to keep the car clean, right? So I was following with my car the ambulance to not get too risky, to don't, because there was no space, because it was space of the patient. So I was following the ambulance with my car, right? Starting from the airport. And when we arrived there, I park the car, I start dressing, right? So the first thing is you put your full body suit on. After you put the mask and you put the glove, the Google, and you put the double glove, right? Double gloves, because when you are getting out of the house, so before starting, you enter the house all full equipment. And the cameras, if you're working with one or two cameras, or all your equipment that you are bringing with you, can be potentially infected when you get out from the house, right? So this is the way you dress. When you get out from the house, the way you undress is very important. As I told you before, you have two gloves. Two gloves means one on the top of the other. So you put another one on, right? So the thing is that the second gloves can be totally infected. So when you get out from the house, you get the second gloves out in this way, getting the gloves from here, without touching the surface of the glove that can be infected. And you throw it out, but don't throw it in the street. I mean, there you put it in the bag, right? So now you have the first gloves, and you immediately wash your hands with amukina.
Is that while you still have that glove on? So you still have
exactly.
you still have a glove and you wash it.
Exactly. After you get the suit back, but you get the suit out, but you have to get it out without touching the external surface of the suit. So you get it out.
So you're like peeling it down.
Yeah.
Peeling it down without touching the outside.
Exactly. And you get out the mask, and you get out the glasses. And you still have the gloves, right? So the mask and the glasses, after you have to sanitize the mask and the glasses, and the equipment. We're gonna go there. So now you are basically with only one glove, because you get out everything. And with that glove, you start sanitize your equipment. Just alcohol is fine. So like a paper or a blanket or whatever, with alcohol, you can start cleaning your cameras. I was working with two cameras with two fixed lens, in the way that I didn't need to change the lens inside the houses or the hospital, right? So the camera was the only thing out of that.
And how long would you spend cleaning each camera? How long will you typically spend?
Depend. I mean, if you have depend of the camera, the lens. I was working with the quite small camera, so like 5 minutes is fine. I mean, this kind of virus die if you clean with alcohol. So the good thing is cleaning the camera and cleaning also the
strap as
exactly.
well. So every part of the camera has to be included.
Exactly. And now you have your camera clean and still the gloves on. You clean the glasses, the Google too, and you clean in the same way the mask, because this one is not used and throw it away. So you keep the mask for the next mission. So you have to clean it too. And after you get the gloves, the first pair of gloves out, you throw them away, you clean, and again with a mukina, you put another gloves, a clean gloves in. And now you get your equipment that should be clean, disinfected and sanitized, and you can get it into a clean space that could be the car.
Were you also, once you'd dismantled, when you'd taken off the suit and things like that, in terms of the suit, I mean, you said the gloves should be thrown away, the goggles and the mask should be cleaned. What about the suit? Because presumably people won't necessarily have access to lots of those.
Yeah, it's a one time, you can use the suit only one time, so you have to throw it away the suit too.
And so you were changing that every time you were going into a high infectious space?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And there's a question coming from one of the participants here. Is it enough to spray pure alcohol on your camera gear and leave it for a while, or should you be manually cleaning it into the pannies?
Yeah, should be manually cleaning. I mean, because not only spraying and leave the camera over there, because you don't know where it can be infected, if it's infected. So it's better like spend 3-4 minutes, you know, it's only about, probably it's gonna be more time for filmmakers.
Yeah.
But for photographer, I mean, I think a couple of 2-3 minutes with the camera, you know, and after probably the first time you get more time, but after a while it's quite easy.
Yeah.
So I suggest to not only spray.
Cleaning the lens and the lens cap as well, assuming they've been coming off on and off. Yeah. Everything. Okay. And then how would you dispose of those materials? Presumably there was a safe protocol with the guys you were working with that you could dispose of them safely?
The material, what do you mean, sorry?
Dispose of the equipment, of the PPE. You'd put it in a bag and then you'd put it in
and they put in the ambulance, and if after they throw them away.
Okay. And in terms of your professional operation, in terms of as a photographer, did you change the equipment that you were carrying from what you normally would have in terms of the cameras, or were you using your normal setup?
I was using my normal setup, working with 35, 90% of the picture that I shoot, and with a 24.
Okay.
But sometimes I was working with only one camera, 35. But it was to bring 2, but normal equipment. Yeah.
Okay. And then in terms of your sort of general operating procedure of a day, how long would you be spending in some of these environments, and you know, how often would you have a chance to rest? Were you trying to limit your time there, or were you able to work quite freely once you had the PPE on?
Let's imagine that the time that you can spend in the house of the patient, it's not a lot. It's not a lot, and you have to think that you cannot get into the house and get picture, you know? So, and after we go deeply on this story, because it's about ethical value too, you know? But what I was working was, for example, one day I was following Nadia in the mission, like from 7 in the morning to until 2. Another day I was working in the afternoon with Sergio or another volunteer for the Red Cross in the morning, on the afternoon, or even in the night. So it was like 6-7 hour day waiting in a different timing and with different turns. And and let's imagine that working 8 hours, you can receive like 6 call, 4 call. That's depend, because sometimes the patient need to go to the hospital, but I didn't have the permission in that case to enter to the hospital, so I was waiting. So there are a lot of time that you wait. These are talking about the work with the Red Cross.
Yeah.
Before you asked me different environment and situation. I've been working in hospitals in Bergamo. And just a small consideration, working in hospital too, you need to follow a protocol. I mean, you have to ask the permission for the people that are in charge of the communication to the hospital, that this person in charge gonna talk with the doctor, that if they are agree, and what's happening, the times I was inside the hospital, they were with me. in following me inside the different department of the hospital, even DCU, and explain me what was going on. And in this case, the protocol was the same that I used for entering people's house.
Mm-hmm. And when you were operating inside a hospital environment, was the time frame also quite limited in terms of how long you could be in there?
Yeah, this is also important because, as we said before, the more time you pass in a risky situation, the danger is gonna grow up, and can be more difficult to control, contain. So was in the hospital. Even in the hospital, there are some departments that can be more dangerous, like the intensive care department, ICU, or the sub ICU, and after there are the other department that are no so risky for the spreading of the virus. So was in the houses was from 15 to 30 minutes, more or less. Can be 40 or 12, but the range was this. And what I was trying to do is trying to get out of the room with the patient quite often, to take, even to talk with the relatives, and even to get out from the place where the patient can be more risky. And from the hospital was more or less the same, try to contain the time, and that this is the time that you are allowed to go there, try to arrange with the doctor the right timing, because they know better than you the risky thing and this kind of situation.
We're having several versions of the same question on the comments here, so let me ask that on everyone's behalf. In terms of getting the permissions from the patients themselves, how did you go about that? Maybe you can answer first in the houses, and then also when you were in the hospitals, assuming that some of those people whose faces you can see, you had to get their releases. How did you go about approaching to get that permission?
Yeah, this is the second very important point, so thank you to ask me. And this is, for my experience, is not this kind of work that you can go out, get a picture, and feature the picture. This is some kind of work that need a journalistic approach and need time to spend with people. So all the people that I shoot, I've been talk with them or their family, and they signed a press release. Press release like this, that this is for Italy in Europe, but it's easy to find, or to ask to the lawyer to write a press release before starting the work. I've been talking with my lawyer, we did the press release. So this is more like formal, the formal way, but it's even more important. More than asset, I prefer to talk that open the doors. You know what I mean? It's not about, okay, we should have the press release. We have the press release because this is how the protocol, right? Mm-hmm. To publish the picture with their faces and then their name, their ages. But more than this, the people will never give you the press release if they don't trust you, you know? So the approach was, when I arrived in people's house, the Red Cross told to the family, to the people that were with journalists, and I was working with on all this work with Francesca Tosarelli, that is my girlfriend, and they did a great video for Arte, Al Jazeera, and Channel 4. So the people present us, let me say present us, and after we been talking with them, trying to explain the work, trying to explain the reason, and the most magical, interesting thing that most of the people were agree and understood the importance of spreading these kind of images, and signed the paper. And more than this, I'm still in contact with some families. And after I got the picture, I back to the families to try to talk with them, to try to follow a bit from what I can, the situation. Mm-hmm. And in this way, you get some kind of relation, even if for a small amount of time that they feel comfortable, and you can see these on the picture.
Yes, you can definitely feel the intimacy in the work, and that's one of the really amazing parts of it. In terms of practically, you know, it's interesting that people are very receptive to you being present, despite it being such a traumatic situation. Obviously, you're having to work quickly, but were you at least able to spend some time building that trust that you just mentioned? I mean, would you sort of spend a couple of minutes, 10 minutes? How long would you usually allocate to trying to speak to people? Or would you sometimes speak to people on the phone before, or would that depend on the situation?
No, only the Red Cross was allowed to talk with patient or families people. So I was in touch with talking about the people, the patient that are suspected COVID patient that are still in the house, was when I entered in the house, basically. And spending time with them, that's depend of the case, that's depend of a lot of things. Like trying to spend some word to understand, explain them the work, get to shooting, and I told you was with Francesca too, and in some cases she was keeping more time talking with them, in other cases I was the guy who was talking with them, and yeah, that's dependent. Let's imagine then when there are Red Cross visiting the patient, the family are around, so you can talk directly with them.
So did you find that working in a partnership helped you as well in terms of being able to communicate more quickly with families?
Definitely.
Yeah. And in terms of practically getting the release form signed, obviously you're having to then move a physical item between the family, you. How were you managing that to make sure it was done safely? The piece of paper, I mean.
That's a good question too.
Yeah.
She was the one that bringing physically the paper, and I appreciate it so much because, you know, the video has different timing too.
Yeah.
And you ask for the pen, because even the pen can be infected, you know, and even the paper can be infected, right? Everything that can be out of your suite technically can be infected. So if they have pen, or if you have a pen, when you get out, you throw out the pen, right? And you cannot throw out the paper that can be infected. So we put paper inside that kind of plastic bag that you close and you use for put food, and you put in the fridge.
So you were doing that for every single piece of paper was wrapped separately, sealed, and then taken for later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was the thing. And after you get out the paper, and you leave the paper out of the where they can get air, basically, right? And you leave the paper over there until you get the paper. You try to sanitize the paper, but without destroying the paper, you know. So it's not easy. This looks like a stupid thing, but it was one of the most difficult things.
Right.
For a sheet of paper, you say, come on. You know, it's easier to clean a camera or equipment than paper.
But that was a real complex issue that you guys had to deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got a question also coming in from the panelists. Would, you know, as an alternative, could you have used, I mean, maybe it was dependent upon the client's legal requirements, but could you have used an on-camera release, so like a recorded release to camera rather than signed on a piece of paper? Or were you finding that outlets, that media organizations were requiring that signature?
Yeah, I know that it's, from my experience, I know that it's fine even if they give you the permit in video, or even they send you you can by email or WhatsApp the release that they authorize. If you don't have time, you can do in that way too. That depends of the media you're working with. But it is fine also to have them recorded their permission on video and on a digital platform or whatever.
Okay, so that could be an alternative. Also, maybe if people don't have access to a printer, they don't have access to those materials.
But I discovered it a bit later.
Well, now you've tried all options, so you can. You're good for the rest of us to listen to. In terms of sanitizing, before we move on a bit more, some of the ethical questions. Someone has asked whether you could use pure alcohol on the camera. Should it be diluted? You know, is there any guidance on that, just in terms of not damaging our own equipment?
I said alcohol probably, but what you need is something that sanitize your equipment. It's disinfectant, we say, like disinfectant.
Disinfectant, yeah.
Like a disinfectant. So that depends how many bottles you have, basically. Because it's better to not dilute it, but you can dilute it. You can use also this kind of stuff, you know. There are
the wipes, antiseptic wipes type things.
And disinfect, we call
wipes.
And you can clean the camera and the camera, but we don't forget the mobile too. So you can easily clean the mobile, you know, getting out the cover. I was keeping my mobile in my pocket or in the car, so I didn't get out the mobile in suspected infected places. But you know, the mobile is one of the things that we use all the time, so we have to keep attention of the mobile. And another important thing is how to get the mask out and don't touch your faces or your nose with the
gloves.
With the gloves and with the hand. So to get the mascara out, what they explain me, it's like to don't get it out like this or like this, but try to do like this.
Okay,
because
so
it's better that the mask don't touch your eyes or your nose. But when you use this kind of, or every kind of mask, basically that's the way to get it out.
Okay, and just a few more practical questions in terms of your operating procedure, and then there's a few questions around sort of, I guess, commissioning processes and the sort of ethical, you know, sort of questions and dilemmas you might have faced. Were you able, I mean, we've looked at this from an FFR perspective, whether it's possible to get any insurance to cover medical costs at this point. Is that something that you were able to find? Our understanding is that since it's been declared a pandemic, you can't get any insurance that will cover you for medical costs relating to becoming infected yourself. Is that what you have found?
Yeah, about the insurance was covered by the paper. Indeed, was lucky for me. And I know there are some private insurance in Italy, but that's basically depend the country where you are coming from. So I suggest to try to research, get information about this stuff. Also, because, you know, working in Italy, the public system is collapsing. So this is something that you have to keep on mind. It's not like going to the emergency in the hospital and they attend you easily. It's even risky now if you are not being infected from the COVID, going to an emergency place. Because there are a lot of patients. I'm talking about Italy, and the situation is upside down totally. And and I know that even big outlets do not assign people to work in difficult kind of environment where you can be infected. I've no directly experience, but I've been talking with Francesca, for example, that I have problem for the media outlet to go to the hospital, for example. So, and this is something that should be clearer even on the media outlet side, because it looks like strange after they get the footage or they get the picture, but they don't want to sign you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this is something that I think it's important to clear. And I think it's important to, on the side of the media outlet, to know that the journalists that are working for you know and follow all the protocol.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
And I mean, obviously, each person's decision is their own. But if you were talking to other freelancers, as many people on this call will be, I mean, it sounds like you were lucky in that you were commissioned to do the work. So you had that commission in place. You were covered by the outlet's insurance in this instance. I mean, is that the kind of setup that you would encourage people to find? And if somebody is freelancing on their own terms, how would you respond to that situation?
So this is a very difficult question for me to answer, because I'm a freelancer. I know how difficult it is to work as a freelancer. And what I can suggest, it's always to try to get some outlet that assign you. But if you follow a protocol, and if you have all the equipment, I think that is something that a freelancer with experience in this kind of environment can approach.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very important to follow the protocol. Don't be stupid to think that, okay, this is an enemy, it's invisible, so there is no enemy, so I can do that picture. No, let's follow a protocol. And following protocol means crash down the risk of get infected. Mm-hmm. And this is very important, not only for you that are documenting the story, but even more for the people around you. Because you can also get the virus and still feeling fine, you know. But you can be a vector of transmission of the virus.
So what measures have you taken now, having done the reporting? What was your next steps after you?
Now I'm in auto quarantine in my home. Mm-hmm. Talking with you, trying to arrange and back up in all the stuff, and playing the piano, and taking time for me and try to relax a bit. And this means that it's few weeks that I don't see my mother, for example.
And how long will you maintain that? Was it a 14-day period? Or
that's the idea.
Yeah.
And that's the idea.
Yeah. Okay. And in terms of managing your psychological well-being, the sort of your family's concerns about you doing this work, is there any advice that you could share from that experience? Obviously, it's a very traumatic situation in many countries around the world. Is there anything that you felt that helped you manage it better, or helped you to help people around you manage the anxiety better?
So I think that this virus is virus of the solitude, and this is its worst side, because I heard a lot of people, even in interview, that say this is a war. This is our war. I've been covering conflict and war since a long time. This is an epidemic. It is not a war. The war is still different. You still have your house here to be in quarantine, to spend your time. A lot of people in wars don't have houses, don't have nothing, still in the street, and they are totally fucked up. We are in very difficult and dangerous situation. This is a big epidemic and pandemic virus, and we have to take all all the thing to try to stop the spreading of the virus. This means try to not join together and to stay home. I know that it sucks, and it even more sucks for older people like my mother. I know perfectly, but this is not the same thing that living under in a conflict, in a war situation, and just try to read more books or watching television or write or whatever. If you're gonna think about this time, I think in the future, this can be the time that we can basically do or try to do what we really want to do, you know? So let's try to do that. And we have to keep isolated. Yeah, it sucks a lot. I love a lot hanging out with my friends, you know, perfectly. But this is not the right time.
Mm-hmm.
So this is even more difficult for, I think, older people
Mm-hmm.
that are alone
Mm-hmm.
and don't have more suggestion about it than try to talk with them and to be, you know, technology is helping us now to face each other in a digital way. I don't know, that it is not up to me. I mean.
Mm-hmm. Thanks so much, Fabio. I'm just going to jump in and say that we've got about 15 minutes left of Fabio's time. So if you've got any other questions, please just pop them into the question panel. I'm trying to get through them as quickly as I can. Just from a sort of practical question, somebody asked via Facebook, how long does it take, usually in your experience, for the Red Cross to go into a household and to diagnose that person and to move them into an ambulance? How long does that time period usually last?
Okay, so the time period is the ambulance receive a call
mm-hmm.
and move faster as it can to go
mm-hmm.
to the people's house, suspected patient house.
Mm-hmm.
They enter,
mm-hmm.
and this is the big question. After they visit the patient,
mm-hmm.
the patient still suspected, means that not all people have received the swab,
mm-hmm.
right? So it's a decision of the family,
mm-hmm.
suggested with the Red Cross people, if take the people to the hospital
mm-hmm.
or keep the people at their home.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is that in normal situation, most of the people that I saw should go to the hospital. But now, when the people decide, the patient, suspected patient, or his family or family decide to send the patient to the hospital, you don't know which kind of hospital the patient can go. And
mm-hmm.
once the patient inside the hospital, they technically do the swab and they can confirm or not confirm the virus, mm-hmm. but the family cannot go to the hospital, not even to say them hello. Mm-hmm. So this is another reason why I consider there is a virus of solitude. Mm-hmm. And if the patient, for a patient that contracted the virus, die, the family cannot even go to say hello and only receive a call from the hospital. Mm-hmm. So let's imagine that the hospital are collapsing. There are a lot of patients, more than the patient they can bring. So there are several patients that go to the hospital far from their houses, far from their village, even on the other side of Italy, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. They bring with the chopper, helicopter on the other side even. Mm-hmm. But the thing that's not the majority of the people, the patient for sure, but you don't know which hospital is free to get there. So a lot of people decide to stay at home. So now, today I got the news and I got the probably the double number of deaths are in Italy, in Lombardia, because a lot of people are dying at home without discovering that being contacted with the virus or not, mm-hmm. because nobody did the swab to them. Mm-hmm. And this is very dangerous because if they stay home, they are surrounded with their families too, right? Mm-hmm. And not all the family have the equipment, also the equipment to protect themselves. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the situation is like this.
just in terms of, there's a few questions, actually sort of the same kind of question that's coming up several times, which is that there's been some comparison with this pandemic to the Ebola outbreak several years ago, and how there have been some claims that sort of photographic sensitivities, or perhaps there's more sensitivity being given to European people than were given to people in West Africa, or journalistic sensitivity. I mean, there's been quite a bit of debate about this online. Yeah, people who are listening in are asking, you know, do you see that there's a difference between covering those outbreaks? Do you see a difference in the ethical standards that are being applied by media outlets in the way it's being covered? Oh, Fabio has gone still. Sarah? Oh, yep. Fabio, you're back. We just lost you for a second.
Break. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. You're back. You're back.
Yeah. Okay. So the first thing that I didn't cover the Ebola outbreak in Africa. I know that some colleagues did it, and I think that the reality, easily the reality that in Europe the policy about the privacy are different than the other places in or African country. This is not something that is good, right? Not something that is good, but it's something that is happening. So I discovered, this is one of the reasons that pushed me, as I said in the beginning, that there were not a lot of pictures of patients or suspected patients from here. So this is one thing that pushed me to try to get this picture. And the most interesting thing, that the same patient or family patient were super agreed in this. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you know, when about the Travelli's family, that was Carlo Travelli was the man in the cover page of the Times. They for sure know that. Even Travelli, that I keep following with the family, I keep in touch with them. It stayed a bit better now. The sub-intensive care unit and the oxygenation in the blood is going better. We're still in the hospital, and they saw the publication, and the family was super happy about it. And you say, so let's show the reality in the, you know, empathic way, or try to do it. I mean that as a great journalist covered the Ebola outbreak in the great way, I think that journalists can do the same here or around the world. This is basically the reason why I try to do as I can to be helpful to colleagues, to try to talk about the protocol of securities, and because I think it's important, and I receive a lot of feedback on people that are out of our business, not journalists or people involved in the photography business, and they say, wow, thank you to show me this kind of reality. This is a picture that people probably don't want to know, don't want to see, right? But this is the reality, and we must do that. We must show the reality, or try to do our best, but in a smart way, with the, you know, all the coverage and all the protection and freedom press release, and, you know, all the things we told before.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And just before we sort of wrap up, I've just seen a few questions about whether or not you were, I think people who've maybe joined a bit late in the webinar, asking whether you were contracted or whether you were freelancing. So I just wanted to sort of repeat for those people that my understanding is you were on assignment for the New York Times. So that was a commissioned piece of work.
Since March 15, I was in assignment since the first day. I was in assignment for the Times until the last day. We decided together with the bureau that was good and was time to get a break, and I'm back home in Turin.
Yeah. And in terms of just practically, sorry to sort of piggyback, I mean, it sounds like your partner was doing video, and as a filmmaker myself, I'd be quite interested, and I'm sure other people on here would be as well. But in terms of managing the sound and the safety around doing sound. Are you able to answer how she was doing that?
No,
No.
you should talk with her directly.
Okay, I thought you might have just had some.
I can tell you what I saw, what I know. That was working with a micro.
Yeah.
On top of the camera. She was working with the E300.
Yeah.
With the micro on top of the camera. She never used the micros.
Like the lapel mics, the fixed. Yeah.
Exactly. She never used that.
Yeah.
And all the sound is being recorded with that micro.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. And that's also one of the camera operators in China had sent us similar advice, just for everybody who's thinking of doing sound or video, not to use the lapel mics, but to use
also because you have to keep distance. And in Italy, I've been heard a lot that 1 meter is enough. 1 meter is not enough, because the problem is that when a suspected or infected people talk, should be masked, but if he calls, or even if he doesn't have the mask and he talk with the people, that these particles keep in the air with higher distance than 1 meter. So what suggested, like, I know that it sucks a lot, but let's try to do 1.5 meter or 2 meter to get this distance. And so trying to, back to your question, you cannot put the micro if you have to keep the distance. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But this is not my business, so this is what I can tell you.
Sorry, I was just piggybacking that question on, because you mentioned the video that was happening alongside your photography. Sorry to squeeze that in there. And just, I mean, you were talking a bit before I asked the question about microphones, but you were talking about the sort of need to tell the story, the reality of this story. You said you've had feedback from people about this, the piece that you made, the work that you made for the New York Times. What would you say the impact has been across Italy for people around you as well? How has it been received in Italy?
I think I'm not the right person to answer to this question. You have to probably answer. We can answer to this question to the participants that are in the call. I would like to know their answer. Basically what I did is like kind of work that I was used to do. Like try to work on a reportage in the empathic way, and
that's just to follow on. There's one more question here before we're running out of time now, but from one of the participants in the call. You've covered a lot of different crises, a lot of different traumas. Are there things that you would say are the same in this, in terms of the way you operate as a reporter, and are there things that are different about this, and not just the practical elements, but also the kind of ethical considerations that you're making?
The practical was, talking about like equipment, this stuff was the same. About it was easier for me this time because it's in Italy. And I didn't need a toll fixer, or I can talk directly with the people. I can get directly in touch with the people and try to empathize a bit better. So this was good for me. And and was more with the question?
Were there just any other ethical decisions or dilemmas that you had to consider whilst covering this, in a different way to if you were, say, covering a conflict environment?
I think that's depend of the way you are getting picture. There's no basically different in the theoretical way you are getting picture. It was exactly the same way I was shooting before when I was working with refugees or in conflict situation. That's something that you have or you don't have, basically. You cannot, now I'm gonna be more ethical because this is, Europe. Mm-hmm. It's not like this, or you approach your photography in a way or not. Mm-hmm. And this is about, doing a reportage, try to take time. I think that I very thank to New York Times that gave me time, because I think that in-depth journalism basically needs time. And in Italy, you cannot do this kind of journal inside most of the newspaper that we are. Mm-hmm. And, because it's happened that if you get an assignment for a paper, you go there, you got the picture, okay, you have the picture, yeah, so that's fine. The assignment is finished. It was not like this. I've been lucky to work like a reportage. So the Times also pushed me in the way to get better picture. And the first picture was good, you know? So it's totally different way to work with the Italian paper, for example, or in this case. And the funny thing that the Italian paper or magazine could do that. Why not? They could do that. It's not about money. It's about you spend the money that you have, basically. Mm-hmm. Or do you want to beat on this story or the other story? It went out a news on the Corriere that the New York Times came to Italy to explain to Italians the situation of the COVID, and it's quite funny, you know.
Thank you so much, Fabio. I'm sorry to everyone, we've tried to cover all the questions that are coming through, but there have been quite a lot. Thank you so much to Fabio for taking your time. We're just out of time now, unless you've got anything else you want to add, Fabio. But really, there's a lot of appreciation coming through on the messages for your work and for also sharing your experiences with us. And yeah, good to hear that Mr. Travelli.
If I can be more helpful, or I can answer private question, I'm available. So let's keep in touch. And thank you, Zoe. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you both of you so much for doing this in a very hastily. We just put it together in less than 2 days. So thank you, Fabio and Zoe, for an excellent hosting of this webinar. Just to let you know, there's been a lot of questions. We're going to take the questions and talk to security experts and Fabio and try and answer some of them for you, and put together a resource which we'll share with everyone on this call and put on our Facebook and websites, and try and get it shared as much as possible. And we will be doing some more webinars in the next week or so. So please, if you know about our work, go to our website or our Facebook page, or follow us on Twitter or Instagram. We will be sharing all of that with you. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you for everyone for joining us. And be well. Take care.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Ciao ragazzi.
Ciao ciao.
Okay.